Welcome everybody. This is the SharePoint Patterns and Practices community call and May 2017 edition. Today we'll have a nice 3 demos around the SharePoint framework development. So 3 different web parts on a 3 different perspectives around the SharePoint framework development. But before we go there, I try to be fast. I always try to be fast, and typically I'm not that fast, but I'll try to be fast this time. Just quickly walking through the summary of the May release. So what has happened, what is the guidance we've released under the SharePoint umbrella as well. One thing maybe to mention on when we're starting this one, which we haven't been super, let's say, open and vocal in the past as well. So it's just making sure that everybody is aware of this. So SharePoint PnP is a open source community-driven initiative coordinated by SharePoint engineering. And we actually nowadays used the SharePoint PnP as the channel for providing all of the guidance across SharePoint development. So anything related on in MSDN, well, actually in dev.office.com/SharePoint nowadays, because we moved some of the files, or relevant files already to a new location. Anything related on SharePoint framework, anything related on add-ins, or even classic farm solutions. The PnP is the channel where we actually provide that guidance for the community. And we work together with community on this guidance as well. And that's why the contributions from the community side are super valuable. Because they help other people in the community to learn how to do development using the modern technologies, or how to do certain functionalities within the, say, adding model as well, which definitely isn't classic technology. Adding model is absolutely supported and will be supported in the future as well. Now, today's agenda, we'll have a quick look on the monthly highlights. So I'm trying to keep this in 15 minutes, and then including the contributions and other topics. And then we have 3 demos today from 3 different community members on 3 different SharePoint framework web parts. Obviously, we in SharePoint engineering, we're heavily investing on the modern customization story, so which means SharePoint framework. And right now, the only capability live from SharePoint framework is the client-side web parts, but there will be more additional extension points pretty soon over there. So it's great to see the interest, and it's great to see that we're getting these web parts and samples shared with others in the community. Good. So let's actually keep on going on the agenda. So quickly running through what has happened on the PnP webcast and the video side. So within the last month, we've released 5, depends on the perspective, new webcasts, which are the provisioning of the PnP, provisioning with PnP PowerShell and Azure Web Jobs with Mikael Svensson, managing the modern experiences in SharePoint Online together with Bert Janssen, a great one also to understand what are how to control the modern experiences in SharePoint Online. What should SharePoint administrators know about SharePoint Framework? That's more an IT pro or architectural consideration webcast, but it's a really good discussion together with Waldek around the things what the tenant administrators or the architects should consider when they're designing their SharePoint Framework solutions. Then 1st of May we released the debugging SharePoint Framework solutions with Elio, and that was a really nice one, got a lot of interest as well, because it actually shows the needed configuration to do an F5 debugging within Visual Studio Code, which is pretty cool. And then yesterday we released this calling external APIs securely from SharePoint Framework webcast together with Waldek Mastercards, which is based on actually community contribution as well. So that pattern has been used by certain customers and certain community members, and they essentially shared the idea with the PnP initiative, and we then came up with a guidance. Well, guidance is coming out pretty soon, a sample and a webcast around that one. Super valuable webcast and a pattern, how to break free from the client side as well, because the fact that you can securely call an external API, for example, a web API in Azure from SharePoint Framework, will enable you, for example, elevation of privileges, capabilities, or even access to on-premises. So there's a lot of interesting scenarios based on that one. Good. Let's actually move on the other things what has happened. So quick look on the monthly metrics from April 2017. As you can see from the metrics, if you're looking into on the PnP usage, you are not alone. So the PnP core component and the PnP PowerShell which we have been tracking super closely in the past. We're looking into doing this for other elements as well. But PnP client-side object model and PnP PowerShell has been used almost in 5,000 tenants within April. And we broke first time ever 2 billion HTTP requests going through these components, which is somebody seems to be in an aeroplane and calling in. So let's see. There we go. Thank you for muting. In a GitHub, we're tracking GitHub heavily as well across the SharePoint organization. So we have 2,222,000 unique visitors for past 2 weeks. GitHub kind of a traffic tracking works in a past 2 weeks perspective. And we have 127,000 views in GitHub, which is pretty decent as well. Most used capability from a PnP core or PnP PowerShell perspective is absolutely still provisioning engine, and that keeps on growing as well. So we had 1,306 tenants where the provisioning engine was actually used, and that's pretty significant number as well. So super proud on behalf of all of the contributors on that one as well. From a top 5 countries based on tenants, no changes over there. So United States, UK, Netherlands, Germany, and Sweden from a tenant number perspective. And then within the countries based on requests, we had a small change. Just have an awkward situation that the video, there we go, where Sweden actually passed Germany in April statistics. So Sweden just went above Germany from the number of HTTP requests going through the PnP JSON or CSAM or the PnP PowerShell components. Good. Moving on things. Please, and just a reminder, please mute yourself. So I'm kind of scan quickly through any unmuted people. Cool. So let me get that one up. Good. So moving on things. What has happened within the last month, within April, and this is our top 15 samples within the April timeframe. And the SharePoint UI responsive package is still number 1. It is the package which is showing how to make native SharePoint with the Seattle.master pretty well responsive. It's not a 100% match, and there's always typically some things to actually adjust or manipulate on that one. But it gives a pretty great starting point, and it gets the native, or let's say classic SharePoint UI pretty responsive by default. And it works also in on-premises and in SharePoint Online. Especially in on-premises, I think that's where people are mainly using this, because on SharePoint Online, you can always alternatively move into the modern UIs, which are natively responsive. The core component, pretty high on the usage. SharePoint CRUD sample related on SharePoint Framework. It's good to see that SharePoint Framework interest is growing. So that was number 3, and that sample is really great. It shows how to do CRUD operations, essentially create, read, update, delete operations using React, Angular, jQuery, or without any framework. So it's a great starting point for learning how to do SharePoint Framework solutions. PnP JS core, pretty high, understandable. User profile mimsync, pretty high, keeps on being pretty high. Core event receivers, webhooks, they're competing between each other. React Socket IO, pretty new one actually on the top 10 list or top 15 list. A great sample from Frank Cornu actually, so I would definitely recommend on having a look on that one as well. The web parts tutorials, SharePoint Framework tutorials, pretty high, that's good to see as well. Core people picker, client-side rendering, these are typical items in our top 10 or top 15 list. React generic app, pretty high as well. And this is something which is showing a kind of in quotes, a starting point, how to do modern development in on-premises without SharePoint Framework. At some point this calendar year, we will release SharePoint Framework to SharePoint 2016 in on-premises. But this one is already kind of showing how you could use the modern customization story in on-premises without SharePoint Framework, which is pretty cool. Then Angular Yammer example, and then provisioning React support ticket. It's kind of a provisioning story around, and it's implemented using React. So it's a modern implementation, but it also falls back on the classic provisioning scenarios. Total views at GitHub was around 47,000, which is a pretty high number as well. For those who are super new on the PnP, if this is the first time you're joining this, just quickly explaining the ways we are working. So our thinking is that we want to provide you an option. How do we want to engage with the SharePoint development area? So we do have a SharePoint developer group or a space in the Microsoft Tech community where we drive people with random questions and feedback and all of that, and create a location for questions. And there's pretty active, actually, people helping each other over there. We do have a bi-weekly SharePoint framework and JavaScript special interest group calls, which are bi-weekly. Next one is on this week, actually on Thursday, where we go through in detail what has happened in SharePoint framework, what's coming up, and then also talk about the PnP JS core. We do have a bi-weekly call for PnP core and PowerShell. If you're interested on provisioning, PowerShell usage, that's where we concentrate on those topics. And the next one is next week. And then we have these monthly calls. If you don't have time or interest that much, once a month we'll do this monthly call where we walk through what has happened within a month. Kind of walking through the contributions and key changes and what's happening within the PnP. In the May 2017 release, we had quite a few new samples on the SharePoint framework side, so new client-side web parts which are showing specific scenarios. These are relatively simple, and they are actually meant to be relatively simple. So they actually show a specific scenario. They show how to, for example, integrate with Riot.js, or how to use AngularJS for certain scenarios as well. Some of our samples still in the SharePoint GitHub organization are unfortunately not up to date with the GA release. We're still working on that one, and most likely I will pull some of the samples away to avoid confusion. So we will leave all of those which are in GA level there and remove the other ones until they have been upgraded to the latest version. That will reduce some confusion around the existing samples. I'm not going to mention all of the samples, just be cautious about the time, but super valuable contributions. And we'll see 3 of these actually live today from the community as well, from Alex and Jose and Belin later on in this call. And yes, well, I'll come back on that one, Paul, in a second. So that is a shameless but a super valuable promotion as well. So we are working with Paul Schaffelin and Eric Schaps, and mainly it's Eric Schaps and Paul working on that one. And there is this SPDef Visual Studio extension, which we are still kind of working right in the urge of getting it live in the VX gallery. But I didn't want to actually put it in here because we have a webcast coming pretty soon, and then do a rather bigger announcement on that one in the next release as well. But super great sample which Paul is referencing in the Iron window. Well, not a sample, extension for Visual Studio, but anyway. Now, on the samples area, not a massive amount of generic samples area, not a massive amount of actions, some adjustments here and there. PnP Portal Intranet Starter Kit, however, was upgraded to version 1.3 by Frank Cornu, so there's new capabilities available. Please check the README on that one, where Frank is going through what's actually happening. On the guidance side, within the last month, we released a really nice guidance on how to develop well-performing SharePoint Online portals. And this is actually guidance article series. So there's 6 articles, if I remember correctly, which are walking through the high-level thinking points around well-performing portals in SharePoint Online. And I will be super honest and transparent. There's no silver bullets on this one, but we're trying to raise the key considerations to think through when you're designing your portals in SharePoint Online. Then there's some new articles around the SharePoint framework development. For example, debugging SharePoint framework solutions in Visual Studio Code, step-by-step guidance how to make that happen with an F5 in Visual Studio Code, and using Office UI Fabric with SharePoint framework solution. There are certain things which you should be aware when you're using the Office UI Fabric React controls with SharePoint framework solutions. And also hosting client-side web parts from Office 365 CDN. That's a new tutorial for SharePoint framework web parts. So walking through that process, how do you publish a client-side web part to SharePoint Online, and how do you serve that through Office 365 CDN. Good. Moving on things. So on the core component, the engine updates, we didn't have a massive amount of activities on the JS CSOM core component side. We're still looking into doing a larger refactoring, which is now scheduled for June. Essentially, the engine refactoring is schema is still, I think the new schema is already pretty much done, and we're working on a new engine capabilities. So in June release, we will have additional capabilities within the provisioning engine. On PowerShell side, and there's quite a few additional commandlets, nothing, let's say, mind-blowing, but highly useful commandlets for people to use. For example, just simply set PnP list item permissions was something that people seem to be happy about having. So you can script and setting unique permissions for list items. Then in the JS core, JavaScript core component, a lot of changes in here, bug fixing, additional support for certain capabilities, and a great documentation work also from Patrick and the community on that side as well, helping people to easily use the REST APIs using a fluent JavaScript API. That's what the core JavaScript component is all about. Now, we had quite a few people contributing on this month, so thank you everybody. I'm not going to mention you all name by name, so I do apologize on that one. But it's great to see the interest on the SharePoint development and the fact that people want to help each other by providing updates on the documentation, by providing additional samples and contributions within a GitHub. We absolutely appreciate this. This is how we make SharePoint development work in the future as well, by helping each other in the right way. And then on the company side, we had quite a few companies which we have a permission to use their logo in our messaging as well. So these are the companies who have given their employees a permission to contribute to PnP and who contributed on the PnP during this month. There are certain contributions which we unfortunately didn't have a time fully test, and we were unable to merge them in by the May release, and I do apologize on that. We'll work on getting them in the June release. And then on the Microsoft side, we have a typical group of people which are working closely in SharePoint engineering or service engineering or MCS services side with us. And then Brian and Cone, Brian T. Jacket and Cone Summers as a let's say, engineering or a PnP core team members. So thank you for your contributions as well. Super helpful for contribute and helping us on making this successful. Now, what's in the queue? Nothing. I haven't updated this massively, but I think the biggest thing from a PnP, let's say, usage perspective is that we are now locking down the plan for having a new schema with additional support for additional capabilities for the provisioning engine for the June release, which will happen within a month time frame. And as part of that, there will be a new schema and engine capabilities. So we'll introduce a new engine which has been completely refactored, which should help on the performance issues as well. And it will make the future maintenance and operations for the customizations easier as well. Other than that, the obviously SharePoint framework is our high priority. We will there will be additional news on SharePoint Framework during this month still, and we'll keep on expanding the capabilities which are coming and supported in SharePoint Framework. There is one relatively big conference later this week, so you can actually assume that we will do some announcements pretty soon on certain additional things, which is super great as well. And obviously, when we do those announcements, we'll make sure that whenever stuff is getting available for the community, as a dev preview, as an example, we'll have the tutorials and guidance available for you to learn how to do the stuff in the right way. Good. But I think that's it for a quick run through. I just can't do this in less than 20 minutes. Well, 19 minutes, not too bad. So it wasn't 25 minutes. But let's actually do some demos around the individual capabilities. So we have 40 minutes, and let's start with Jose. If I pronounce Jose your name properly.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you, Esa.
Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, all good. All good.
Okay, thank you for having me here. So I will start sharing the screen now. Let me know when you... Cool. Let me know, please, when the screen starts to appear.
Absolutely. And loading for me, I'm located in Richmond right now, so if I'm getting it, then because I think you're in London.
Yeah.
Right. I got it. So all
Perfect.
good.
So thank you. So nice to be in this community call. For those who don't know me, my name is Jose Quinto. I work for a company called Content and Code, which is based in London. And I have been working with React and the SharePoint framework for quite a while, and starting to play with the library PnP JS core as well. So I'm really happy to contribute with this community and share my experiences as well. And today, specifically, what we are going to see is a sample with PnP JS core, but focusing on these 3 key points, which is the integration between PnP JS core and SharePoint framework login systems, using some kind of async functions inside of PnP JS core, using the TypeScript version 2.1 or higher, and establish the SP context-based info. So let's move on the code itself. This is actually my code, and in order to show you how to integrate both login systems, PnP JS and SharePoint framework, the first thing we will need to do is import both functions. So for example, we import the beginning logger, function listener, log entry, log level, and web from SP PnP JS, which previously we need to install using npm install, and that will allows us to use this login system inside our React component. From the other side, we import the log function, which is actually the log from SharePoint framework. Let's see how we can connect these 2 things in the code itself. So starting with the React component, here is our React component, which is a class who extends from this component React. And in the constructor, we will do this mapping, enable this login function. And actually, the code behind Essence, which enable this login, is that one. So first of all, we have to say to PnP JS which is the active log level we want to apply. So for example, we have, let's see how many levels we have available. We have error, info, off, verbose, or warning. So for example, we are playing now with info, which means that we will see error, warning, and information levels on the screen. And actually, we have now currently in PnP JS core, we have different listeners. So the default listener is console listener, but in this particular scenario, we are using function listener, which is this this class we are using on here. And that allows us to customize a little bit more the listener itself. So at the beginning of the function listener class, we have the signature of the function is an entry, log entry on here. And we will be using this entry point, which is actually a PnP JS entry, in order to pass through the SharePoint log itself, to the SharePoint framework log itself. So for example, we get on here the component name, which means that we don't need to rewrite every time we want to copy and paste this code over the components. If we do that, actually this function, instead of using the typical switch structure, we use this object which do actually the map between the SharePoint framework way or methods called verbose, info, warn, or error, and the PnP JS types, which is verbose, info, warning, and error as well. And this is an important point on here. In order to build the message, the information message, it's important if we have an error, it's important to create a new instance using the constructor of the JavaScript object error. Because otherwise, when we pass through the SharePoint framework function, we will have a limit in the function which is 100 characters. But if we use the constructor of error, we don't have this limit itself, which means that for the error we will have more information. Another important point here is sometimes in the errors we have a lot of information. So we have one object called data in the entry. That means that this data can have different sub properties inside. So we are using here JSON stringify in order to represent all the information through the screen. Let's move on now and see how this information works. In the demo, we have a document library. This document library have different documents, and the demo itself will be, let me add the web part on here on the screen. The demo will be grabbing these documents and represent the sizes of them. So for example, the 5 documents, the sizes and the total at the bottom. In order to do that, we can show in the screen how this login system is working. By now, it's only representing information on here. But let's change a little bit the code just to say, okay, let's try to grab a different library, which means that maybe library name doesn't exist. And let's try to run the code again. So here we can see the error itself, which is a really is an object itself, and say, okay, the list library name doesn't exist in the list. That gives us a clue about what is going on behind the scenes. Even if we go further and we want to put in our application some section in which represent the errors, we can do that as well. Let's move. Cool. This is about the error. This is about the error function listener. Actually, what is going on? We create this listener function listener. We assign to a variable, and after that, we need to subscribe in the logger. Logger is PnP object, and we need to subscribe the listener. That means that every time that PnP JS, which is a wrapper for the REST API, through an error, will be the error will be passing through the function listener itself. Cool. That is about the error integration. I think it's a pretty good tool to have in our applications. And now let's see how we can use the async functions inside the PnP JS. So for example, this function which reads all the file size, I am calling this function initially in the React component did mount. And that means that I am trying to call a documents library and read all the file sizes. So by now, for example, we are using here the new web object, which is actually PnP JS functionality, and we are passing over here the context. We will explain quite a bit later what that means. But by now, let's say we have an async function called read all file size. This async function, because we are calling inside an await, we need to be sure that the function is async. So we can call this web list and whatever chain method we want on here, but the final one needs to be get, because the get method returns a promise, and what a wait keyword is waiting for is a promise. So that means that if we put an await word on our code, we'll be converting a promise of whatever, for example, this is promise of any, into the object itself. So I have defined some interfaces. Let's see, for example, response item here. And this interface have the file list and title. So actually, this is what I am selecting on here. I am doing a query through all the list, getting the list by title, documents, getting all the items, and selecting only the title, the file list ref, and expanding file length on here. That's pretty interesting because even using this chaining tool, we can catch, or using catch, the session storage catch, only by adding this method on here, which is pretty nice. Okay, let's the last demo, let's add some debugger on here, and let's see actually, what is going on behind the scenes using this kind of await? Let's save the file. Let's go doing the thing and refresh this page. Cool. We can see how the workflow, the development workflow, allows us to have all the maps. So the development experience and the debugging experience is so cool. So we have here the debugger just below, and we can see the response. The response is not like an array of promises. It's actually an array of objects itself, and that's pretty good. And because we have add in the PnP JS core library the selects and expand, we can see actually how we only get the title and the field ref, and inside the file, well, actually inside the file we get all the object itself. But I think we can modify that by adding in the select by adding this file length as well. Let's see if that works. Let's refresh the page. And for example, if we look into the first object and the file, actually we are only getting the length. So that means that we can build really performant applications using this kind of structure, and it's really quick to work with. So after that, we have actually all the objects on our response, and the only thing we need to do in order to integrate with the React ecosystem is using the map function, which is an array function, which converts our array of objects in whatever we need, and returning our own React component structure we want. And after that, just set the state on our React state, and that's all. Actually, the only thing I want to mention now, the only thing else is just enabling the context, and we are using here in this constructor for web, we are using the page context, which means that for classic pages, PnP JS for classic pages is using the SP context page info by default. So we need to add this page content on here in order to make that working fine on these pages. We have another option, which is actually instead of being in the React component, we can be in the web part base client side web part, and on init function using this PnP setup just to set up this context globally if we have some application which is using different React components. Yep, actually, I think this is probably covers all the few important points I want to mention. This code for this web part is available on GitHub, and feel free to add any feedback, issues, or question on top. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jose. Really, really great sample, and great to get these practices recorded and also as a sample, because that helps enormously people to learn how to do stuff in the right way.
Thank you.
While we can chat here quickly and have a look on the questions on our window, Alex, if you can actually start sharing, we'll move next to you next.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yep, all good, all good.
Okay. Let me know when you see my screen.
Yep.
Can you see it?
Loading at least for me yet. I got it, but I think I'm pretty close to you from graphically perspective right now.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. I see that others. Yeah.
Good.
Okay. So hello, my name is Alex Terentiev. I'm a lead developer in company named SharePoint located in Los Angeles, California. I'm really happy to be a part of the community, and thanks for giving me time during this community call. Today, I'm going to show you an example of how to adapt your client-side web parts to selected SharePoint theme. as all we know, users can simply change the look of their sites. They can go to site settings, change the look, and select from available themes, like out-of-the-box themes or some custom themes that were added by administrators and SharePoint developers. And all the themes differ significantly in color schemes that are used there. And as a user change the theme, colors and images on the page may change as well. And if your web part was designed for, let's say, like standard Office theme, it may look not so pretty on dark themes, right? And here on the slide, you can see a default web part that was created by Yammer generator without any customizations, and blue background is not so cool on black one. So yeah, it would be great if we can modify this one automatically when the theme is changed. Another scenario is related to new experience and modern pages. When user creates a site, each site or subsite can have its own primary background color. I believe that it was always inside themes, but now it's in UI always on all modern pages. You can see it on in the rectangle with the abbreviation of site name. So it's like a huge UI element on your page. And it differs from site to site. And again, it would be great if some parts of our web part UI can use the same color to be like on the same page with these elements on the page. And it turns out that it's actually very easy to implement the support of these themes in your web parts. There is a out-of-the-box themes loader module that's included in SPFX and is loaded by default on each modern page. And the main feature of this module is to iterate through all loaded web parts and modules, then look for SCSS variables that have specific format, and substitute correct value from current theme. The theme variables are SCSS variables of specific format. And here I'm showing you the format for them. Theme part shows what property value to apply from current theme. And like theme is a keyword, and the name after colon is the name of the property from the theme. The default part shows what value to use if the property is not set in the current theme. For example, default Office theme doesn't have values for primary background and primary text. So in that case, the default values will be used on the page. And yeah, the main issue for me was to find all the properties from the theme that we can actually use, but all of them are located in windows.themestate.theme object. And if you're familiar with like themes in classic SharePoint, the properties, the names are different. So all these, like in classic SharePoint, we have another properties to customize if we're creating our own themes. So in the web part example, I selected 3 theme properties to use. One of them is primary background. It's a background of the whole page. The second one is primary text. It's a primary font color for the page. And the third one is theme primary, that is primary background color for this site. And I believe these like are 3 primary properties that will be used in any customization, and that allows you to significantly improve your UI in this theme thing. Also, in the web part, I've added Office UI Fabric details list to display theme properties and values from window.themestate.theme object. So let's go to the code. Here, this is my SCSS file for my web part. As you can see, there are 3 variables that will be processed by the themes loader module and replaced with colors from the theme. The primary variable is for primary background, primary text for primary text, and theme primary, theme primary. Then, as usual in SCSS files, I can use these variables in my classes, like here, and then in my markup, I'm just using the CSS classes. And that's it. The only difference with the usual CSS variables that instead of providing the specific value, specific color for the variables, they are declared like as strings in a specific format that can be then parsed and replaced with a themes loader functionality. So let me show the results of the web part customization. So here I have 3 tabs and 3 different sites with 3 different themes applied. This one is Orbit theme, one of the darkest themes in SharePoint. So the background of the details list is set to theme primary. As you can see, it's the same color like in this rectangle. The background of paragraphs is set to primary background, which is the same like background of the whole page. And the font color is set to primary text. So in that case, it's white. The other one is orange theme. In that case, the background is white. The background of details list is orange, and the font color is, I believe, 333. And the default one, it's an Office theme. In that case, again, the primary background is white, theme primary is blue, and the font color is 333 again. And here, as I mentioned before, for this theme, for default theme, primary background and primary text are not set in the theme. In that case, the web part is using the defaults that were set in our SCSS file. So that's it. It's really a small example, but I believe that it will help you and bring you additional business values to your web parts. The web part is in a GitHub, and also I have presentation slides on the docs.com and can share the link in the Skype meeting as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Alex. And again, super valuable sample as well, because I think a lot of people have been kind of wondering how do I tackle with this theming challenge, and then because obviously you're not the only one who's thinking this through. So having that kind of a simplistic sample is great because then people can easily adapt to core scenario, and that's why we actually, like mentioned with the Jose's presentation as well, we absolutely value simplistic scenarios and simplistic samples as well, because then there's no additional complexity around additional stuff. We just concentrate on showing the scenario, how it's implemented, and then people can adapt that easily. So thank you for this one. Great job. Great job. Thank you. So moving into Velin then.
Hello, everyone. Can you see my screen?
Yep, all good. All good. That was fast.
Yep. My name is Velin Georgiev. I'm a senior SharePoint developer and consultant. I built SharePoint solutions since 2008. And today is my first time speaking in front of the community. So I'll present you React SharePoint framework web part that interacts with Yammer. So in our web part, we will just call the Yammer search service here, and we will authenticate before. Before we run our sample, some things to do. So if you'd like to run this sample, you would need Office 365 Enterprise tenant, because Yammer is not available with the dev tenants. So I think that I'm using E3, but E1 or E5 is also good to go. So you can create a free trial and try to run the sample. The second thing that we need to do in order to run the sample is to, when the tenant is provisioned and you have the Yammer app deployed, you have to go to your Yammer account and register an application. So there is a very good guidance on the Yammer developer side how to do it. And once you've registered the application, as you can see, I already have one and it's enabled. Once you register the application, you have a client ID, expected redirect URI. One thing that I should mention is that you should go on the basic info tab here and specify JavaScript origins, because it does not enforce you to do so. But if you don't specify your JavaScript origins here, you will not be able to authenticate. So do not forget to specify your origins here. Now, let's go to the sample. I'll run the sample into the local workbench in private mode first. I've already started the solution. I already started the Node.js server. So I'll start a new private session and run the sample into the local workbench to show you how the experience is. So this is the sample, and I'm getting this login button here because I do not have any authentication cookies. I'm not authenticated, so I will need to authenticate. Got my user. Now we'll see another login screen, unfortunately. And then we have to allow the application with our Yammer account. Once this is done, we're good to go. So I'll just search across the Yammer, and hopefully I'm receiving some results. This is the behavior in the local workbench, so you can develop even into your local workbench against Yammer. I've just put the Yammer search here, and just to show you that we're able to interact with search. This behaves a bit differently into the online version, because I'm trying to do some smart authentication there. I'll show you how this looks. I'll just revoke my access to this application as a Yammer user to show you the experience from the very beginning. Now I'll start a new private session. And I'll launch the online workbench again. Now, pretty much the same behavior. We'll still get the login button here, but if I click it, I'll skip the first two screens. That means that I'm already authenticated, even if I'm in a private session without any cookies. So when we're in the online version, there is I'm calling it a smart way, but there is a very simple way to authenticate the user and just get to this screen where you have to load the application. I'll try to show you this later. So now, again, I'm able to access the Yammer APIs. And for the last third time, I'll just start a new private session, because I already approved this application just to show you that we don't need to authenticate anymore, and it just works. Login again. And now, hopefully, we don't see the login button. Yes. And we're still able to retrieve information from Yammer. Now, let's go into the code and show you how the sample is structured. We have the usual components folder, pretty boring. Looks very much like Hello World webpath with this lifecycle event here. I'll talk about this in a moment. Then we have this Yammer folder where all the Yammer interaction is and all the Yammer logic is. So I've tried to keep this separate, and you don't have any dependencies from React here. So this folder can be copy-pasted in any other web path, even if it's not the React web path, but knockout web path, and you can start using these providers here and call Yammer. On this side, I'll just show you the Yammer provider and how it looks. So, few sample methods here. And this is just a wrapper around the Yammer JavaScript SDK. So I'll go on the Yammer website, and we have a JavaScript SDK here. Unfortunately, we don't have a TypeScript support for this. And I decided to create a wrapper around it into my classes and then start using it. And these are pretty much all the methods from the SDK. The problem is that this SDK is not very fluent, so every request against the API should be made within this request method. So we have many endpoints, and you're using only one method to call all the endpoints, and we can make this a bit more fluent. So I've decided to just extend this request method in especially for my search functionality, and call the search endpoint into my own method that just wraps the request method here. In the request method, we are putting just a jQuery Ajax settings. This is how the guys from the Yammer did it. So this is the actual call against the search service here. But we can make it more fluent for our own use. We can have our own results object here, and some support specific for every endpoint that you're seeing here. So this can be easily extended into our solutions. Now, on the configuration part, just the prod config is where you specify the client ID and the redirect URI in order to run your sample against your Yammer application. On the component side, this is a lifecycle event, a React component lifecycle event that fires before on render. So I'm trying to authenticate before the component is loaded. If I cannot authenticate, I'll show the login button. Nothing really special here. Another good thing that might deserve some attention is that I've wrote some unit tests here, and you can go into the unit tests and you can see how you can fake a method, because my Yammer provider does lots of calls against the Yammer API, and in my tests I don't want to do any calls. So I decided to fake methods and to fake just returning some promises here. So maybe you can see how you can fake methods here directly within your unit tests. You can always have a mock provider here and use the mock provider, but this is another good way how you can just fake data and fake methods depending on different unit tests here. I think that's pretty much with the solution. I can try to quickly debug and show you how the smart authentication works, for example. So it is very simple. It will try to check for Yammer authentication cookies. And if it doesn't find Yammer authentication cookies, but you are in a SharePoint online, it will try to get the cookies from an iframe. So here we are trying to do a traditional get login status from the Yammer JavaScript SDK. It checks for cookies, does not find the cookies, and just rejects the promise. But I'm checking here if I'm on the online. If I'm not on the online environment, I'll just reject. Otherwise, I'll attempt to do an iframe authentication here. Let me quickly try to debug this and see whether we'll be able to do it in 5 minutes. I'll just have to delete all my Yammer cookies. Cookies, Yammer, remove all. Good. I'll start the debugger once again. Now, I'll try to authenticate again. And I'll try to add the web path. This will fire my smart authentication. And if we are lucky enough, oh, I was not able to attach. Okay, I'll try to attach the debugger for the last time. Close all the Windowses. Probably I'll have to clear the cookies again because, oh no, good. Now we're already authenticated. I'm sorry about this. I'll just clean the cookies once again and I'll hit this breakpoint again. Content settings, site cookies, Yammer. Remove all. Good. This time it would work. Good. Now, because we're in the online environment, I was rejected here because I don't have cookies, tokens, or whatsoever. So I'll hit this method here. And this is the other breakpoint. So I'm trying to load this URL into an iframe. Let me show you how this URL looks like. If you can see here, we have the domain, OAuth call, client ID, response type, everything that we need to do OAuth call, so redirect URI. Now, we have another listener here. When the iframe loads, it is going to bring us another URL, and I'll try to hit another breakpoint here. Good. Now, what's returned into the iframe? I'll just quickly show. This is the URL that we get into the iframe. So we have an URL and access token. That's good enough for us to authenticate without any cookies. How this magic is done, it's done the same way that Yammer embed do it. So we just export the Yammer embed and try to reproduce the same behavior here. There is one setting that needs to be done in order for this smart authentication to work on the Yammer admin side, and you should be aware of this, because this should be done from a tenant admin, and if you're in a big enterprise, this might not be available for you. If you go to the Yammer admin, on a security settings, there is one setting that's called Enforce Office 365 Identity. This is an extra security setting for Yammer. This should be enabled in order to just to do the iframe authentication. Otherwise, you would need to authenticate with the 3 initial screens and login screens. I've tried to put this into the README file. So if you have any problems running this sample, submit an issue. But as overall, that's pretty much it. Now, if you register a trial enterprise, this is not enabled by default. So if you're about to try this sample, you should go and enable this setting here. Some good use cases where you can use when you can access REST APIs. Maybe if you'd like to have a SharePoint and Yammer interaction in one web path, or the same branding experience, the traditional stuff, because many of our clients, they simply do not want to have this Yammer look into the page, and they want a custom solution. If you, of course, would like to have more control over the Yammer APIs. And another issue that we recently had is that at the current moment, the Yammer embed web path that we were trying to use does not support embedding on threads. Hopefully they will add this into the future. But at the moment, we ended up with building a custom solution just because we need threads displayed into a modern page. And that's pretty much it from my side.
Yes. Thank you, Velin. Thank you. Great work on your first community presentation as well. I'm going to flip on the slides, and
thank you.
2 minutes off the schedule, and I play myself because I took slightly longer time again on the intro, so no worries on that. But thank you, Jose, thank you, Alex, and thank you, Velin, also for a great sample and great demo. And this is great stuff to get actually recorded and shared for the others in the YouTube channel as well. But I think that's it for this time. So we didn't have a time for Q&A, unfortunately, which is pretty typical on a monthly community calls. We would urge people, if you have specific questions, go to join on the special interest group calls. We have always Q&A time on those. So those are meant to be more interactive. Monthly calls are more around us telling and then showing stuff together with community demos. But other than that, I think we're pretty much good to go. So thank you, everybody, for joining. Thank you for the great demos, for those who were showing them, for Alex and Velin and Jose. And recording will be available within 24 hours in YouTube channel. I'll do some social media posting on that one if you want to share the recording with any of your colleagues who couldn't actually make it. But thank you for this one. We'll hoping to see you in the future community calls, and please do let us know if there's anything what you need, what is missing. Use the issue lists, use the Microsoft Technology, Microsoft Tech communities, and all of the other channels. But thank you, everybody. Let's meet again on these calls. Thank you.